Hi, in this video, I'm going to talk to you about how to pull data from your survey and then bring that into SPSS, prepare, and organize the data. Let's get started. So once your data has already been collected via a survey, your next step is to develop a coding schema for the survey, transcribe the data or download data, label it, check it, edit it, filter it, address missing data, and then once the data has been absorbed into your software, transform variables into a format that might make them more suitable for analysis. Let's begin with the first step here, the coding schema. Once your survey has been created, that's well and good. You need to figure out a way to translate what's gathered in the survey into numbers in a spreadsheet. And that's the coding schema part. This includes assigning variable names to represent survey items, assigning numerical or verbal labels to survey responses, noting variable type, assigning missing data code if relevant. Let's examine what this can be done with an example. So as an example, we're going to look at here a survey of 2,000 respondents on health consciousness and fast food. So here's a survey. In the survey, folks were asked to indicate the level of agreement on a 1 to 7 scale, a Likert scale, on 3 variables concerning health consciousness. So the first one is I'm concerned about my health. I watch what I eat. I usually read the ingredients on food labels. Now, you've got to think downstream in terms of what happens when this data goes from here to your spreadsheet. What's it going to look like? Let's just say, for example purposes, somebody answers the survey as follows. Now, how do we code these radio buttons selected? Let's begin with the first thing, which is figuring out how do we figure out what these different items are going to be labeled in our spreadsheet. As such, I'm concerned about my health is kind of wordy. When you pull this into a software, whether it's a spreadsheet software or like Excel or SPSS or what have you, these items, survey items, are going to become columns in a spreadsheet. Now, if you think about a column name that's like I'm concerned about my health, well, that's kind of wordy. And not only is it wordy, but it's non-compliant. Various software, Excel being an exception, have restrictions on the variable on what goes in a variable name. So you can't have such a long name. You got to think about a shorter name. So now we got to think about a name that complies with the naming conventions and is concise, while at the same time conveying the essence of the item. So I'm concerned about my health. So let's think about possibilities out here. This name could be concern or health concern. I'm going to use here something called snake case. And so health concern could be the name I could use for this particular variable when I bring it into my spreadsheet. Now notice a couple of things out here. Health and concern are separated by an underscore. The reason for this is purposeful and because you cannot have a space in a variable name. Other restrictions with regard to names of variables include not beginning a variable with a number, not having special characters like a percentage sign, an @ sign, a lot of things that are controlled by the shift key on your the things that are on the number keypad in your computer that are controlled by a shift. So exclamation, @ hash, dollar, percentage. None of these can be used, or generally speaking, as a rule, most of these cannot be used in a variable name. The special character is not allowed. A hyphen, not allowed. Space, not allowed. So you must then think about names that would comply with the naming conventions, yet effectively convey what the variable is about. So here is another one. So one way of doing this is to take keywords from the sentence and use those in the variable name. Some would argue these variable names are a bit wordy. Others might argue that they are, well, they're different. They look like they're different things. So one solution would be, because they all pertain to health, another possibility would be to unify them with a common naming convention, which could be to call them, I'll make some room out here to do this in a different color. You could call them health 1, health 2, health 3, or health, or something similar like health concern 1, health concern 2, health concern 3. This is one way you could name the different variables when they hit the spreadsheet. Now, the second issue to concern ourselves with is, what do we call, what do we label the response as? In the spreadsheet, we have the options listed as strongly disagree, disagree. So if somebody marks this radio button here, it will then mean under health concern, health 1, we're going to have somewhat agree. Somewhat agree, while it does communicate the level of agreement, it's not as easy to analyze as a number is, and therefore we want to use a numeric label out here. The default used by Qualtrics for numeric labeling is the following. It's, it begins from 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. For a 7-point scale, your last option will be marked 7 by default. There are scenarios when the default doesn't quite work out by Qualtrics, and then you got to do other work to kind of make it all consistent and manually assign numeric labels to different levels. Right? So long as you specify you want to download your data using numeric labels, it'll come in as follows, with numbers 1 through 7 in the column when you download data from Qualtrics. So here I've identified two issues here. One is naming the variables. Second is coding the different options, response categories. Now, you may also go in and, in some cases, if somebody didn't respond to a question, it isn't good practice to leave a blank if somebody is a missing response. You could have a missing data code like 99. Now, clearly 99 is not a reasonable option. So 99 could be our missing data code. If somebody misses a question, we simply replace we enter the number 99 there. Right? Okay, so that's one thing you would do with these sorts of questions. Now, the next set of questions that respondents were asked were about their rating of food at 3 popular fast food restaurants. As before, we have here 3 variables: McDonald's, Chipotle, Shake Shack. Now, here it might be kind of simple to label these. You could simply label these as McDonald's, Chipotle, an English teacher may not like the way I'm going about this, right? She's probably going to say, gee, don't you know how to use, uppercase for the first letter of a proper noun? Yeah, and maybe McDonald's should be uppercase M, uppercase D, be correct and more appropriate that way, but I tend to follow the rule of having them all as lowercase. It's just convenient for me, because bear in mind, variable names are case sensitive. So somewhere along the way, I make a mistake, I can get, uppercase, lowercase muddled up, and that could cause a whole host of problems that'd be really hard to diagnose. So my own preference is just keep it all simple, keep it all lowercase, forget about the advice of the English teacher when you're working on variable naming conventions. Whatever your rule, stick with it, be consistent. That's what's important, I think, to remember. Okay. So, and the other part of the naming would be, very much like what we saw before. It's extremely bad by default is going to be 1, moderately bad 2, and so on. The last option will be 7. This is also one very good reason why, because of the default numbering convention of Qualtrics, for us to always use scales where the negative is on the left and the positive is on the right. So extremely bad on the left, extremely good on the right. So have this bad to good type gradation of a scale is sort of like preferred option. Okay, moving along here. Oh, and by the way, just going back to the previous one, you may, while I said McDonald's, Chipotle, Shake Shack, you could have just easily called rating McDonald's, rating Chipotle, rating Shake Shack to be more clear about the naming convention out there. This question is about rank ordering it. Here we could label these as rank Chipotle, rank underscore McDonald's, rank Shake Shack. We'll have 3 variables identifying the rank of each of these restaurants in the spreadsheet that emerges. We go to the last section of this short survey, which asks for demographics. As we know, demographics should, of course, always be at the end. The first, this question out here is a question here on gender, and that seems like a simple enough one, I think. What do we call gender? Well, gender, right? Simple enough. So we can label gender in our survey, in our spreadsheet as gender. Age as age. Place where you live sounds wordy. Well, make that location. Now let's go on to what else we have here. We have genders. Now, male, female. By default, Qualtrics is going to number males 1, females 2. That being said, you want to be a little cautious out here because your numbers 1 and 2 doesn't mean that gender equal to 2 is better than gender equal to 1. We're going to presuppose females are better than males. You might have some sort of preconceived notion about that. That's fair enough. But as far as our data is concerned, bear in mind, gender is a nominal scale. So even though we are going to label male as 1 and female as 2, it really is, it's a nominal scale. 1 and 2 cannot be compared in a numerical sense. Similarly, age will by default be numbered as follows: age categories, and place where you live, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, New Jersey are the options, labeled as follows. Again, we're assigning numerical labels to what is obviously a nominal scale. Somewhere in our spreadsheet, we'll actually designate this as being a nominal scale, so we don't accidentally compute the average location or average gender, right? Because that would be nonsensical. That's our survey. So, and we've just gone over here in these screenshots, you see the survey. We just went over how you would code the survey out, okay? So our coding schema exercise then is about assigning variable names to represent each survey item, assigning numerical or verbal labels to survey response, and note the type of each variable. This is the exercise we're going to engage in, we just engaged in. Now, when we used to do a lot of paper questionnaires, you would have, the next step would be to hire somebody to code the lovely in, manually type in the responses into a spreadsheet. And, many years ago as a doctoral student, I loved doing that kind of job because it made me some extra money on the side, made my bills. But bear in mind, this is something that is a thing of the past. There are software that'll scan paper questionnaires and kind of absorb all the information into them into a spreadsheet. Again, this is more common when you had a lot of paper surveys. We hardly ever use paper surveys now. We're mostly using online survey platforms. Qualtrics, in my view, is the best out there. Others like Zoomerang, SurveyMonkey, even Google Forms all have the option of absorbing the data from the digital platform to a digital data file somewhere. The format in which data is downloaded could be either CSV, could be an Excel file, could be a SAS, statistical software file like a SAS file, a SPSS file, and so on. And even if you've got secondary data, most secondary data tends to be in some text-based format. So CSV is a text-based format. CSV stands for comma separated values. It is by far the most popular form of data format out there. Okay, so before we do this part, let's take a look at the survey itself. So let me take you into the survey platform. What I'll do out here is stop the share for just a second out here, because I want to show you how the data can be absorbed from the survey software into your spreadsheet. So bear with me just a moment while I locate the survey, and then we'll bring it into our spreadsheet software. All right, so here is the fast food survey I alluded to earlier. I showed you earlier. Right? So here's the actual fast food survey, and so if you click on in the menus on top, it's an option called data analysis. Click on that one, it'll show you the data. Unfortunately, we might have to wait a few seconds because it just turns out that Qualtrics is busy indexing or re-indexing the data, which might add a few seconds on here. Now, once that is done re-indexing the responses, there's an option here called export and import. If you click on that, you can select the export data option to push the data out. We're just going to have to wait a few more seconds here. I'm hoping this indexes soon enough so we can I can show you how to bring the data into out of Qualtrics. Okay, so this will come eventually, and when it does, we'll come back to this tab. I'll let that run out. Okay, I'll be patient. Okay. So that's how you would typically download the data into, and you would typically get options like, you want a CSV format, Excel format, so on. So while we do this stuff, our next step is let's go and get that fastfood.csv file that has already been downloaded before for you. And so I've done that hard work for you already. So I'm going to go into our learning management system classes and get that data file for you. So here is coming up. That's right. Oh, actually, so fortunately this one is in. So let's take a look at this before we go on to getting that data. So the survey responses are in. So if you go to here under export and import under Qualtrics, click at export data. Now it's going to push the data out to some other format. Hopefully you can see the pop-up window that's appeared on my screen. If not, just know there's a pop-up window that gives me options to download the data as CSV, that is short for comma separated values, a text-based file, or tab separated values, or Excel, or XML, if that's of user relevance to you, or SPSS format, right? I'm going to go back to SPSS, and here you can see more options as well. So let's go back to CSV. Now, here I have options of downloading all fields. We'll leave that checked. And the reason for that is that sometimes you don't want certain fields, like maybe you don't want to get information about the IP address of the machine that the survey was taken in. Right? But for the most part, I'll leave this all checked, leave that selected. What I do want to change here is not have numeric choice text, but have numeric values. Now I'll hit download. Well, there's a more options option out here where I can ask for other things like commas for decimals and so on. And this might be relevant to if you are maybe in a country that uses commas and periods differently from America, like France, then you might want to think of these options. But for the most part, I don't worry about those. So click on download now, and it's in. Here's a CSV file that's coming in. you're typically going to get a data file that is like a huge CSV file. And I'll show you, give you a look, peek at this file, what it looks like. It typically looks like this. You got start date, end date, so on. I've opened this up in Excel. Yeah, you're probably wondering why am I opening Excel? Because it just opens up by default in Excel. My intent was to download the file, not to open that in Excel, but it just opened up in Excel automatically. CSV files by default open up in your most available spreadsheet software, Excel. Typically, Quadrants give you some header junk like this. It has 3 header rows instead of 1 header row, which creates a kind of a problem if you're working with a software like SPSS, which is very picky about having just 1 header row, not 3 header rows. So, okay, so that's a little bit about the data. Let me take you back to some more about that data. So that same data that you saw in Excel, I'm going to open that. I'm going to force open that in a Notepad. And it will look like gibberish, but bear with me here. It is opening up. Here it is in a Notepad format. So here is that gibberish looking file. Okay. Now, it might, again, looks like gibberish to you, I know. But if you just focus on any given row, you'll notice a very clear format, right? So different columns, for the most part, are separated by commas, and hence a CSV file. Okay, right. So what's important is whenever you work with these files, you open the file not in Excel, or you not open the file in Excel. So we're going to go over now to our learning management system, Brightspace, and here is, you can find, so the fast food data is right here. Now it's important now to right click on this thing, not just single click. In most computers, you single click, it fires it up, opens it up in Excel. Hence, I'm recommending right-clicking and selecting options like save link as or save file as, right? So when you go to your learning management system, download this file we're going to be using called fastfood.csv, I would like you to right-click on the file and select download file as, select download save target as, download file as, save link as. These are the options you want to use to save the file. The options specifically will vary based on your browser. And you see this option when you right-click on the link. So once the file is downloaded, make sure it is not open in Excel. Okay, so make sure the file is open in is not open in any format whatsoever, not Notepad, nothing. Okay, so just download it and that's it. You should be able to locate the file on your computer, know where you saved the file. There may be a folder where your computer typically puts downloaded files into. It may have wound up there. But just go into that folder, go into go through Finder or My Computer and locate that file. Now, the next step is going to be to load up SPSS. The reason I'm doing that is because that is our next step in our journey. Let me provide you with some context about this. So we're on to our next slide here, and give me just a second while I pull up this slide. So here's the slide we're on. We're on the slide where I'm asking this to download the data exercise. So the data's been downloaded. The file is fastfood.csv. We want to now bring that data into SPSS. Okay. So load up IBM SPSS like you would any software. So when you open it up, it'll have nothing. It'll be a blank spreadsheet, very boring. It'll look a bit like this. There are 2 ways of opening this this file now, and I'm going to share it with you The simple way, and the simple way, which I learned from, by the way, a student who taught me this, and the way I would normally open a file. So usually you want to open a file, you go to File, Open Data. And that's how you typically open an SPSS file. And then when you do that, it's going to pull up something like a bunch of files. And so you're going to find, basically identify what file. You'll navigate a folder that's relevant, and you'll open the relevant file from there. Give me just 1 second while I set this up. You by now should already know where your file is. You should be able to go to that file, that folder, and open. On my computer, I'm looking for where the file might be. So you're looking here at my C drive. I'm looking at my C drive, and I can go around here and dig through and find where that file is located. I found out earlier that it's in downloads. I'm going to go to my downloads folder here. Someplace here is my downloads folder. And in downloads folder, I should be able to see, some files. Now, as you can see, when I open up my downloads folder, it has a lot of files, a lot of data files. Now, all these have a file extension SAV. The reason for that is SPSS is looking for a data format that understands. The data format used, that we have is a CSV file. So you see out here, it says files of type SAV. That's what it's looking for. We have to tell it to look for CSV files. So if I say CSV out here, where is there a CSV option? There's one. There are two CSV options. We're looking for the text CSV option. So text, start.text, start.dat, start.csv. That's what we're looking for. As soon as you hit that button, it's going to pull up all of your CSV files that are on your computer. We'll have to look here for the file that is the fast food file. Okay, so that is one way of going about it. Look at the fast food file, and if I click on fast food now, it's going to open it up in the text import wizard. Okay. So again, I'm hoping you are able to see a text import wizard pop up. If not, no worries. Just know that a text import wizard popped up when I did that. Okay. Now let me show you method number 2. Method number 2, more popular with students, which I think is a really cool method actually. I can see that's a really neat method I know about, is to simply go over to bear with me. Simply go over to your folder where your file is saved. It could be on your desktop for all you know, or wherever else it might be. And once you locate that, if it opens up accidentally in Excel, make sure you close that Excel application, because whenever you open this file in a different application, it's locked by the application, and SPSS cannot access it. So now all I'm going to do is drag this file over into and drop it on top of the SPSS screen. You may not be able to see me dragging and dropping here, but just understand, if you do a drag and drop onto the SPSS screen, it is going to then start the import process. Okay. So again, I'm not sure you can see the import wizard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I can explicitly share with you the import wizard, because again, I'm not sure you can view windows on top. It turns out there's no way I can share a specific sub window like the import wizard. So I'm just going to assume here you're able to view my import wizard now. Whenever you go with the drag and drop option, you typically have this thing happening where the view doesn't look the same as it would if you were to use the file open option. So to go through the import wizard options, when you do a drag and drop, be sure to click on the advanced options text wizard. So it sticks in the wizard. The wizard is a wizard. Okay, it's smart. It's supposed to be smart. So now, So I have my SPSS screen right now, and just to be sure, I'm gonna stop the share and reshare, so I'm sure you can view information. So stop the share and reshare it now. You should see a text import wizard within my SPSS window. And here are the steps to kind of follow through now here. Our first step is to see, well, as a text import wizard, we've got all our information right up here. In step, we're now going to hit, I'm going to hit the next button. And by the way, notice I've already labeled those as help 1, help 2, help 3 in the CSV file. So that's one less thing for us to do here because I already did that work in the CSV file. Okay, hit next. And now when you hit next, it's going to ask you, how are your variables arranged? Delimited, fixed width. Well, it's delimited because it's comma separated values. So the delimiter is a comma. Are the variable names at the top of your file? Let's look at the screen below. Indeed, they're on top of the file, right? What is a decimal symbol, period or comma? Since we're in the United States, it is a period. If we were in Norway, we were in France, it would be a comma. If you have a computer that is, I don't know, French speaking, because you've been using it in France, and I mean that in a lighthearted way, of course. If your computer complies to French norms for period or comma, your default may not be the same as mine. In that case, you may need to ensure that decimal symbol is specified as being period. Our next step is the next button. If you're using a Mac, it might say continue instead of next. It might be in the middle. Okay. In our step 3 of the wizard, we have information. The first case depends on which line. Well, line number 2. So that's default is correct. Each line represents a case. That is indeed true. We want to import all the data. So here again, we'll leave all the defaults unchanged. Moving along, we can see out here, we're now on the page where it's asking us which delimiters appear between variables. We know it's a CSV file, therefore, comma seems to be the appropriate delimiter to leave on there. I will warn you that sometimes when you get data from Qualtrics directly, you may have both a comma and a space delimiters. Just be mindful of that. The preview gives us, let's just take a look and see that we have all the data looking good. And by looking good, what I mean is there are no phantom columns. Sometimes you see column names like B, 17 or something like that popping up. The key here is B, right? So what SPSS will do is if it finds, data that does not have a column name because it got, shifted, then it'll make up a name because every column must have a variable name associated to it. But these phantom variable names that you didn't anticipate are a sign that your data ingest didn't work out correctly. Then you got to go and figure out what did you miss out here? Did you make a mistake here or here? In our case, we'll leave all these defaults unchanged. They all look good. Our next step asks us to specify for specifications for variable or variables selected in data preview. Nothing to change out here. It all looks good. We'll say next. And then, would you like to save this file for future use? No. Base syntax? No. Click finish at this stage or done. So when you do that, what happens is that import wizard shuts down, which is why the screen share also stopped. And you see two things happen. You see an output window like this showing up. So anytime SPSS does something, it reports the results in a separate window called the output window. We're not so concerned here about the output window, so I'll go back to the data view. There we are. In the data view, we have our data. Information about health variables, McDonald's, Shake Shack, gender, age, location, rank variables. So we have now, at this stage, accomplished our first goal. We have gone through the steps in the text import wizard. We didn't have to change anything. It turns out the defaults were great and they brought the data in well. Our next step here is going to be to assign appropriate variable names to our survey items, numerical variable labels if relevant, assign appropriate variable type, and a missing data code. Let's do this one by one. So in our data, in our data set we have pulled in, we'll change the default variable names if warranted. We'll enter a longer description of the label, assign numerical labels, verbal labels, appropriate variable type each variable, assign a missing data code. Let's go through these steps one by one. Now, we are right now in data view. To make changes to names of variables, you can't make the change up here like you would in Excel. You got to go to the variable view. So please note, I'm clicking on the tab called variable view. If you're using a Mac, I believe the variable view and data view tabs are in the middle, not in the left. They're still called variable view and data view. I forgot to mention, if your computer is for some reason, you know, the operating system language is not English, please convert that to English, because all of my instructions assume that the labels and menu names are all in English. Okay. So here we have our data is transposed, right? So our variable names now are along rows, not columns. Along the columns are the properties of our variables. Let me toggle back to data view. Okay, to show you what that is. This is all the variables are in columns. Now variables are in rows. There's no data here. There's only variable description information. Let me space these columns out, make more room out here. Okay. Now, ID is the name that we have assigned, or name has the variable names SPS will be using under the hood. Label is what it will report in the output window. Type is the variable type. Width refers to the width of the column in which, in the data view. Decimals, again, decimal places for any given variable. Should there be 0, 1, 2 decimal places. Value labels are ways to assign verbal labels to numbers. Missing data code can go here. Columns refers to how wide how many space you're providing in the data view. Width, I'm sorry, was the how much space you're allocating to any given variable and it's not about column width. Columns is about column width. Then we have here alignment. It's obvious. The measurement scale, and lastly, the input format, role format. We'll look at those in just a second. So the name ID seems okay. It is indeed, type is numeric. I could change it to comma, dot, and whatever else, but numeric seems like a good default format, so I'll leave that as it is. Label it ID, uppercase ID. No good reason why I'm doing that. I just want to make sure I make it a point to show you that under label, you can have a different reporting label for the variable. So the variable name might be some cryptic variable like health1, and you may not know what that means. You can write out the full label under label. For example, we have here health1. Well, health1 could be, let's do this, and we'll go through these variables one by one. If you recall health1, here it is. I'll go back a few slides and show you this picture. So health1 is, I'm concerned about my health. If you wanted to, you could write that full-blown expression, I'm concerned about my health here. You don't have to worry about complying with variable naming conventions, because these are not variable names. They're simply labels. So I watch, oops, sorry. I watch what I eat. So you can write the variable name as just the way it is if you wish to. I usually read the ingredients on food labels. Okay. So you could do this if you wanted to, okay? Your report will look kind of wordy and messy if these are too long. But again, if you wish to, you could assign these long labels to different variables. And then you have here McDonald's, and I'll just say here rating McDonald's. Here I'm gonna follow the advice of my English teacher, right? Reach Chipotle. Gender, age, okay, there we have it. I've labeled every single variable one by one from top to bottom. And under values, we have now the values. Now, values are not quite relevant to a numerical variable. By that, what I mean is, if you wanted to, you could literally go in and label, well, what does one mean? What is the verbal label for one? It's strongly disagree, you know. 7 is strongly agree. You could say that, but it's not very meaningful because we don't really care about the different levels when you have a interval scale variable like this. We typically have concern ourselves typically with things like averages and so on. So let's skip past that. I'm going to go all the way down here to the bottom. Under gender, here's where I do care about those things. So gender has values 1 and 2. If you recall from the survey, let's go back to the survey. Here's the coding that Qualtrics used for gender. Male is 1, female is 2. And that's what showed up in CSV files. So we want to now say, well, if somebody marked male, well, we coded that as a 1. But let's also leave the verbal label in there because it might be handy when we're looking at tables across tabs. So I'll click on the ellipsis right by under values for the gender variable, the 3 dots that is. And then you get, I'm going to type in the value 1, male label. 2 is female. I'll add them consecutively and hit OK. So again, for age, I'll do the same thing. And in case you're not able to view, I'm going to tell you what's happening out here. There's a pop-up window showing up when I click on the ellipsis. And so I'm entering in here the values for each of these things. 1 is 1829, 2 is 3039. I'm getting this from the survey, by the way. Here we have it. So I've assigned value labels for the different age groups now. We go on to locations. Again, the same idea as before. We're kind of assigning the verbal labels to the numbers that Qualtrics assigned. Okay, here we have it then. And okay. There's no need to assign value labels to the other 3. We're not going to worry about it. Now, before we look at the other remaining columns, let me just go back to data view, a little segue here, tangent here. See the kind of this little cool thing that happens. I call that magic. But data view. We're back in data view, and now you notice the gender column has numbers 1 and 2. Well, that's what it had before. But if you click on this little icon called value labels icon, it's going to toggle between the numerical label and the value label we assigned. So again, hold on to your chair. You might just fall off with the shock. I'm kidding. Here we go. Boom. So now gender has male, female, age has the numbers, and location has the actual areas. Click on it again, it goes back to number. Bear in mind, that's just a mask or an alias that doesn't really affect the analysis. Okay, back to variable view. Now let's examine missing. So if you wanted to, You could, for example, for health one, I could assign here a missing variable code. I could say missing variable code is, so if you see a 99, for example, that is a missing variable code. In this case, I know that we don't have any missing values, so let's not worry about that. And then columns is the width of the column. So if I go back here, let's say to health one, and if I push spread this column, I'll drag a little bit, go back to variable view, see now that column width is saying 10 instead of 8. That's what it does. I'll make it 8 here. So they're all the same width. Okay, alignment, we know what that is. And last column, the second last column, measure. That's important. Now, for whatever reason, when we use the import wizard, SPSS assume that ID is a scale. Well, what is a measure? A measure is a scale of the variable. It could be nominal, ordinal, and we know it could also be interval or ratio. SPSS pools interval and ratio into scale. So you have nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio, right? So we are going to use here nominal for identifier because ID is indeed nominal. Health one is interval, so we'll call that scale. Health two, scale. Health three, scale. McDonald's rating, most survey items are seen as being scale variables, that's fine. Gender is the default nominal works, and age, location are also nominal. Rank is ordinal, so rank order variable, and that's it. The last column, input or target. Let's see what those options are there. If you go right here, input, target, both, partition split. These are relevant if you're doing some sort of data mining kind of task. We're not going to worry about designating a variable as being input or target here. So we'll leave those just the way they are, not worry about them. Okay. At this stage, our data is ready for the next step. Let's go back and take stock of where we are. So back a few slides. So you have labeled the data already. Okay. What you can do at this stage is things like checking the data and so on. We can do these things. We'll do those soon, but in another video. I'm going to pause this video here. I'll end this video right here. But before doing so, I want to do one more thing. You have your SPSS file ready. Now, just so you make sure you have this file, you don't lose this file, accidentally delete or something, you can go in and save this file. So when you hit save, the save button, it'll prompt you to assign a name to it, and the default, the name of the file will be something, the name you assign, .sav. SAV being the file extension for SPSS file formats. Once you save it as an SAV file, the next time you can simply double click it to open it, or open it directly. There's no need to go through the import wizard once it is already an SAV file or SPSS native file. All right, thank you. See you in the next video.